Sometimes we chase faraway treasures, forgetting what we already hold. Stay with us and discover a gentle story that might just change the way you see your own life. Subscribe and let the journey begin.
There was once a man who lived at the edge of a quiet village. A village that lay where the river curved softly around the land. Every morning, the sunlight would spill across the rooftops, touching the earth in gentle gold. And every morning, he would wake with a quiet thought in his heart. Today, perhaps, the world might give him a treasure. He owned a field, not grand by the measure of kings, but large enough to stretch under the morning sky, green and alive with grass that whispered with the wind. In that field, the river flowed gently, its water murmuring in patterns only nature could understand. Birds would rise from the edges of the trees, calling softly to one another, their songs carrying across the field as if they were sharing secrets with him. The man would walk there at dawn, hands brushing along the grass, feeling the cool earth beneath his feet. Every step felt familiar, yet he felt an ache, a longing for something more. His eyes would wander across the horizon, searching for sparkle in the distance. Diamonds. Always diamonds. He imagined them glinting under the sun, bright as stars, enough to change everything in his life. He dreamed often as he walked. He imagined the soft clink of coins in a pouch, the sparkle of gems in candlelight, the whispers of people who would admire his wealth. But the field, no matter how fertile, offered no diamonds. It offered life, yes, the quiet magic of the seasons, the wind across the grass, the soft hum of the river, the dance of birds at sunset. But not the riches he craved. One morning, as the sun rose behind the hills, the man stood in the center of his field and breathed in the cool air. The wind carried a faint scent of flowers, soft and delicate. He closed his eyes and listened. There was the distant rush of the river, the flutter of wings in the trees, the gentle rustle of grass. It was peaceful, almost hypnotic, and yet he felt a pull from somewhere far away, beyond these gentle hills, beyond this quiet river. "I cannot stay here any longer," he said to himself, his voice barely louder than a whisper. The birds paused for a moment, as if listening. "I must seek the diamonds elsewhere. I must find them, or I will never know what I am capable of." He thought carefully, pacing through the field, each step pressing into the soft earth. There had to be a way. He could sell this land, yes. Perhaps the right person would see the beauty he could not, or would find the value he had overlooked. And with the money, he could travel, he could explore, he could chase the treasure of his dreams. The thought was both frightening and exhilarating. His heart beat faster, not with fear, but with anticipation. For days he debated. Each morning the birds would sing, and each night the river would murmur. Each moment seemed to tell him the same thing. Time does not wait, and opportunity comes only once. Finally, he made up his mind. He would sell the field. Not tomorrow, not when the wind shifted, but today. He would place his future in the hands of fate and journey beyond the hills that bordered his home. The market was bustling, filled with the smell of fresh bread and the faint tang of earth. Villagers moved between stalls, their voices blending into a steady hum. Birds perched on wooden beams, calling softly. He approached a man who traded in land, a stranger who smiled politely at the sight of him. "I wish to sell my field," the man said, his voice steady, though his heart raced. The stranger nodded, examined the papers, counted the coins, and handed them over. They shook hands. The deed was done. As he walked away from the market, coins heavy in his pocket, He looked back once. The field lay quiet, bathed in sunlight, stretching green and endless before him. The river glinted softly, whispering as always. Birds rose from the edge of the trees and called out, their songs drifting in the breeze. He did not hear them, not fully, for his mind was already far away, dreaming of the diamonds that awaited. His journey began along the edge of the river, where the water hummed softly over smooth stones. The wind carried a gentle scent of pine from the hills, and he inhaled deeply, tasting the freedom and the uncertainty that lay ahead. Each step took him farther from home, farther from the life he had known. At first, the journey was easy. The hills rolled gently before him, the grass beneath his feet soft and welcoming. He slept under trees at night, listening to the wind rustle the leaves, the distant call of owls, the gentle babble of the river. He thought of home sometimes, of the field he had sold, and a quiet pang tugged at his heart. Yet the thought of diamonds kept him moving, step by step, mile by mile. Days turned into weeks. The forests grew thicker, the hills steeper. Rivers swelled with rainwater, and he learned to follow their curves, always hoping they would lead him closer to fortune. Birds guided him sometimes, calling from above, moving in patterns he could follow if he listened carefully. The wind whispered secrets across the mountains, carrying hints of distant lands, of treasures yet unseen. He encountered other travelers, people who shared stories and food, who warned him of dangers and deserts, of paths that led nowhere. Yet each warning only strengthened his resolve. He pictured the diamonds, imagined them glowing in the sun, imagined the life he would have once he found them. He pictured the smiles, the admiration, the change he could bring to his world. Nights were long and quiet. He would lie beneath the stars, the river a distant hum in his memory, imagining the sparkle of diamonds. The wind brushed past his face like a soft caress, and the rustle of leaves became a lullaby. Sleep came slowly, but it came, carrying him through the darkness, keeping him moving with dreams of treasure. Weeks became months, and months became a year. He traversed valleys where shadows stretched long in the afternoon sun, and deserts where heat shimmered like waves over golden sands. He found no diamonds, not one. And yet he did not stop. The dream was too strong, the hope too vivid, and the memory of the field he had left behind faded into a soft ache rather than regret. The wind carried new scents as he moved, the whisper of distant flowers, the tang of salt from a faraway sea. Birds circled above him sometimes, flying in patterns that seemed to beckon him onward. Streams bubbled softly at the edges of forests, and he would drink, resting beside them, listening to the water's quiet song. It was comforting, a reminder that life moved even as he chased his dream. He learned to find joy in small things, the taste of fresh fruit offered by a kind stranger, the soft warmth of sunlight on his face after a storm, the gentle rustle of reeds along a riverbank. Each moment held a treasure, even as the diamonds remained elusive. And yet, in quiet moments, when the sun dipped low and the wind stilled, he felt a subtle unease, a whisper in his heart that perhaps the greatest treasure was not ahead, but somewhere he had left behind. But the thought was fleeting, and he brushed it away with the promise of diamonds shining just over the next hill, just beyond the next river. The man moved steadily, day after day, carrying only what he could hold. His footsteps pressed into the earth softly, leaving temporary marks that the wind and rain would erase by morning. He traveled through valleys where shadows pooled beneath the cliffs, and sunlight filtered down in golden beams that danced across the rocks. Every time he reached a new crest, he paused, letting the view stretch out before him. The hills rolled endlessly, promising discovery, yet hiding it just beyond sight. Sometimes the wind would rise, brushing his hair across his forehead, carrying scents that spoke of distant forests, of rain, of wildflowers blooming far ahead. He inhaled deeply, imagining the diamonds gleaming somewhere in that expanse. He did not know exactly where, but he felt certain they awaited him, sparkling quietly, like a secret the earth kept for those who dared to seek. Rivers appeared and disappeared along the way, winding like silver ribbons through the valleys. He learned to follow their flow, trusting their direction even when paths became steep and rocky. He slept beside them, lulled by the gentle gurgle of water over stones and the soft chirping of crickets hidden among the reeds. At night, the stars stretched overhead, infinite and steady, offering him a quiet companionship. Days blended into one another. The air grew heavier in some regions, scented with pine and moss, in others dry and earthy, tinged with dust and warmth. Birds guided him occasionally, swooping above him, calling with voices clear and melodic. Their paths seemed deliberate, as if they were telling him to move left, to rest here, to look carefully at what lay hidden beneath the grass. He met travelers along the way, sometimes sharing a meal, sometimes exchanging stories. One was a woodcutter with hands thick from labor and a voice like gravel. He warned the man of long stretches of barren land where nothing grew, and of deserts where heat shimmered and disoriented even the strongest traveler. Another was a woman who traded in herbs, with eyes that seemed to read his heart. She smiled knowingly and said, "Seek, but remember that treasures are often hidden in places you've already walked past." The man thanked her, nodding, though the meaning of her words floated like a cloud he could not yet touch. Nights were long and still, perfect for reflection. He would lie beneath the sky, the soft rustle of leaves above him, the distant rush of water somewhere beyond sight. In the dark, he imagined diamonds scattered across the land, tiny points of light that could transform his life in an instant. He dreamed vividly of the coins, the treasures, the admiration. And yet, in the quiet of the night, he felt a subtle ache, a whisper that perhaps what he sought was not where he thought it would be. But mornings came with golden sunlight, and he rose each day determined. He crossed hills where wildflowers clung to rocky ledges, their colors bright against stone and soil. He followed winding trails where the wind carried the scent of damp earth and the soft perfume of blooms hidden in thickets. And always he listened to the birds, always moving forward, always hoping that the next turn, the next hill, the next riverbank would bring him closer. In time, the terrain grew more challenging. Mountains rose high, their peaks veiled in mist. Cliffs plunged sharply beside the narrow paths he walked, and streams he attempted to cross gushed with sudden strength, resisting his passage. Yet the man persisted. Each challenge was met with quiet determination, each obstacle a lesson in patience and endurance. The wind often guided him, a subtle push against his back, a whisper of encouragement as he climbed steep slopes or trudged through dense forests. Even in the hardest moments, when fatigue weighed heavy and his legs ached, he would pause and breathe in deeply, letting the wind wash over him, letting the trees and the birds remind him that the earth was alive, that it carried secrets and treasures for those who sought them. Occasionally, he would stumble upon a small settlement, quiet villages nestled in valleys or tucked against mountainsides. People would offer him bread or water or a place to rest. And every time, he would share a piece of his story. They would listen with curiosity, offering gentle smiles, nodding as he spoke of diamonds, of fields sold, of dreams that seemed always just beyond reach. Some would caution him, telling him that chasing distant treasures could blind a man to the beauty that already surrounded him. But the man would only nod, politely, for he could not yet hear their message fully. Months passed. Seasons changed quietly as he moved across the land. Spring's fresh warmth gave way to the heat of summer. Summer softened into autumn, and then the first cold of winter nipped at his fingers. Snow dusted the peaks of mountains, and rivers slowed under sheets of ice. Still, he pressed on. He wrapped himself in wool and fur, kept moving with careful steps, trusting that persistence would lead him to what he sought. He began to notice patterns in the world around him. A cluster of birds that always appeared at the same hill, singing a soft melody that seemed to echo the river's song. A particular wind that came from the east, carrying the scent of hidden streams or mossy rock. Even the way sunlight hit certain cliffs, casting shadows that looked like pathways to him. All these small cues became part of his map, subtle guides that urged him onward. Yet, even with these signs, the diamonds remained unseen. Sometimes the man felt his resolve falter. Nights were the hardest. When the wind was still, when the stars hid behind clouds, when the river's murmur faded into the quiet of the world, doubt crept in. Perhaps he had sold the wrong field. Perhaps he had left behind something priceless without even knowing it. But each morning, the sunlight would spill over the hills, and he would rise again. Each morning, the wind would brush his face. The river would whisper in its soft, constant way. The birds would sing their melodious guidance. And each morning, hope returned. There was still a chance, he told himself, still a possibility that the diamonds were just ahead, just beyond the next horizon. He crossed valleys that smelled of wild herbs, walked along ridges where the grass bent beneath his steps, and followed rivers that shimmered under the sun like molten silver. Each night he lay beneath the sky, watching stars drift slowly, listening to the distant calls of owls, the soft gurgle of streams, the subtle rustle of trees. He whispered to the wind that he would not give up, that he would search until the last stone had been turned. Sometimes he thought he saw glimmers in the soil, reflections of sunlight that seemed like diamonds. But each time they proved to be nothing but quartz or river stones. Each false spark was a gentle lesson in patience, a reminder that true treasure would not reveal itself easily. And so he pressed on, learning to find small joys along the way. The taste of sweet berries, the smell of damp moss, the sight of a deer drinking quietly at the river's edge. Even as he walked, he began to sense the subtle language of the world around him. The wind shifted to signal changes in weather. The birds' calls varied with the time of day. The river's song altered as it met stones and bends. The man listened carefully, taking each cue, letting nature guide him as much as his own hope. And though the months stretched into a year, he never stopped believing. The diamonds had to exist. Somewhere, beneath the earth, hidden like a secret held by the world itself, they waited. And he would find them, or he would not stop trying. The seasons turned quietly as the man wandered farther from the land he once called home. Spring's soft rains gave way to the heat of summer, and summer gradually softened into autumn, with gold and crimson leaves drifting lazily to the ground. Each day was a step into the unknown, yet each step carried a rhythm of hope that pulsed quietly in his chest, steady and insistent. Sometimes the world felt vast and unending. Mountains rose like ancient walls, their peaks hidden in mist, and rivers stretched far below, glimmering faintly, almost teasing him with hints of silver. Forests crowded the valleys, thick with moss and shadows, their trees whispering softly with the wind. The man walked through them slowly, listening to every rustle, every bird call, every quiet sigh of the earth. He felt as if the world itself were speaking in a language only he could hear. Nights were long and often lonely. The soft cooing of owls became a lullaby, the distant hum of rivers a gentle companion. He would lie beneath the sky, counting stars that shimmered cold and bright, and in the quiet, his mind wandered. Not to the diamonds, not always, but to the field he had left behind. What had he given up? What had he missed? The questions came softly, persistent, and yet he pushed them aside. There was still tomorrow, still another hill to climb, another valley to explore. Sometimes he encountered deserts, wide, open stretches where heat shimmered like a mirage and the ground was dry and cracked beneath his feet. He would stumble over stones that were hot to touch, and the wind carried only dust and distant cries of unseen birds. Yet he moved forward, feeling the rhythm of the earth beneath him, trusting that it would lead him eventually to what he sought. He met travelers along the way, some kind, some wary. One was a merchant with a small caravan of mules who shared bread and water with him and spoke of lands far away where rivers ran wide and mountains gleamed with hidden stones. Another was a shepherd who guided him across a steep pass, warning of sudden storms and loose stones. Each encounter left him richer in knowledge, if not in the treasure he sought. He learned to read the wind, to sense the coming of rain, to watch the patterns of birds as they rose and fell in the sky. Yet as time passed, the hope that had driven him began to fray at the edges. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and months into years. The diamonds remained unseen, a dream that shimmered always on the horizon, never within reach. Nights grew colder, winds sharper, rivers more treacherous to cross. And still, he moved. He did not stop, though exhaustion weighed heavily in his bones, and the quiet ache of longing settled deep into his chest. There were moments when despair whispered in his ear, soft and insidious. Perhaps he had made a mistake, leaving his field, abandoning the life that was familiar. Perhaps the diamonds were nothing but a dream, a trick of imagination that led him endlessly away from home. He shivered beneath the sky, listening to the distant call of a lone owl, the whisper of wind over dry grass, the faint gurgle of a stream hidden in the distance. Yet even in those moments, he could not stop. He had begun the journey, and the journey demanded he see it through. He learned to find small joys in the world, even when his heart ached. A deer drinking quietly at the edge of a river, a fox slipping silently through the trees, the soft hum of insects in the heat of the day, the sudden burst of flowers along a path that had seemed barren. Each moment, though fleeting, reminded him that life carried treasures of its own, even when the ones he sought eluded him. There were times when the man would rest beneath a tree, closing his eyes to the sun filtering through the leaves. He would listen to the wind, soft and warm, carrying the faint scent of distant flowers. He would feel the earth beneath him, steady and comforting, and he would think of the field he had left behind. The thought was bittersweet, like a melody half remembered.
Sometimes he imagined the field bathed in sunlight, the river flowing gently, birds rising from the trees, singing softly, calling to him. And for a brief moment, he wondered if he had been blind to what he already possessed. But the desire for diamonds remained, quiet but insistent, like the heartbeat of the earth itself. He imagined them buried somewhere, hidden beneath stone and soil, waiting for him to find them. He imagined the sparkle catching the sun, 1,000 tiny stars gleaming in the earth, and he pressed on, mile by mile, day by day. Winters were harsh and unrelenting. Snow dusted the peaks of distant mountains, and ice formed along the edges of streams he followed. He wrapped himself in furs and wool, moving slowly, carefully, feeling the sharp bite of cold in his fingers and toes. Even in these moments, he found comfort in the small signs of life. The tracks of animals in the snow, the faint call of a bird overhead, the distant murmur of a river beneath ice and snow. Nature, he realized, spoke in subtle ways, offering clues to those who listened. And he listened. He learned patience in ways he had never imagined. Each day offered a lesson. A stone that seemed like a diamond but was not. A river that blocked his path but could be crossed with care. A storm that arrived suddenly but passed quietly, leaving the world washed and new. Each obstacle taught him that treasures were rarely given without effort, and that the path itself held meaning, even if the goal remained unseen. Sometimes he imagined what might be waiting for him when the journey ended. He pictured a valley filled with sunlight and sparkling stones, a treasure that could transform his life in an instant. He imagined standing amidst the diamonds, letting their light reflect in his eyes, hearing the soft murmur of the river and the distant calls of birds. And yet, even in his dreams, he felt a tug at his heart, a quiet reminder that perhaps the greatest treasure was something else entirely, something he had left behind without realizing it. Despite the doubts and the fatigue, he never stopped moving. Each morning, the sun rose behind the hills, spilling light across the land. Each morning, the wind brushed against his face, carrying scents of pine, moss, and wildflowers. Each morning, he followed the subtle guidance of birds, streams, and the shifting patterns of sunlight. Step by step, he continued, holding on to hope, trusting the world, listening to its quiet instructions. One day, he came upon a plateau high above a river valley. The view was breathtaking. The river wound below like a ribbon of silver, and beyond it, hills rolled into the distance, dotted with forests and open fields. The man stood silently, feeling the wind sweep across him, carrying the faint scent of distant flowers and the hum of life from the valley below. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the sun warm his face, listening to the soft chorus of birds, feeling the pulse of the earth beneath him. And as he stood there, he realized something he had not fully acknowledged before. The journey itself was teaching him, shaping him, showing him the quiet wonders of the world he had overlooked. The diamonds were still unseen, still waiting somewhere, but he began to understand that the world offered treasures in ways he had not anticipated. In patterns, in sounds, in the subtle shifts of wind and light. Yet even with this understanding, a small ache remained. The thought of the field he had sold, the life he had left behind, lingered quietly. What treasures had he abandoned? What wonders had slipped through his fingers? The questions rose like a tide, persistent and soft, brushing against the edges of his consciousness. And so he pressed on. One step, then another, following the river's song, the bird's flight, the whisper of the wind through the trees. He moved slowly, carefully, listening to the quiet language of the world, trusting that each small sign would guide him closer to what he sought.
While the man wandered far across mountains, valleys, rivers, and forests, the field he had left behind continued its quiet life. The river hummed along its usual path, curling gently around the green expanse of land. Birds rose each morning from the trees at the field's edge, their calls carrying softly across the grass, greeting the sunlight. The wind swept through the blades, bending them gently, rustling in a rhythm that had gone unnoticed by the man when he had walked there long ago. The new owner, a man from the village, had purchased the field without knowing much beyond its fertile soil. He arrived at dawn on the first day, the early light catching the dew on the grass, the river shimmering faintly in the distance. He took a slow breath, inhaling the scent of the earth, of wildflowers and the faint tang of morning mist. The land was alive, and he could feel it in the way the wind brushed his cheeks, the way the birds moved through the sky. He set about working the field carefully. He plowed the soil with patient, steady movements, turning over the earth, feeling the weight of the land in his hands. With each furrow, he noticed something strange. Small glints, almost like sunlight bouncing off hidden surfaces, buried just beneath the soil. He paused, brushing away dirt, and saw tiny, sparkling crystals catching the light. His heart quickened, but he dismissed it at first, thinking them mere quartz, ordinary stones reflecting the sun. Days passed, and still he worked, planting seeds and tending the earth with quiet care. The glimmers persisted. Sometimes, when he tilted the soil just so, they reflected a light more brilliant than any ordinary stone. His curiosity grew, gentle and insistent, urging him to dig deeper, to examine more closely. He worked methodically, with patience and precision, feeling the rhythm of the earth beneath him, guided by the soft murmur of the river and the calls of birds circling overhead. One afternoon, the wind picked up, brushing against his face and carrying the faint scent of rain. He paused, wiping sweat from his brow, and knelt to brush away a patch of soil near the center of the field. The ground beneath revealed something astonishing. Small, flawless diamonds glinting in the sunlight, buried just beneath the surface. He could hardly believe it, and for a moment he leaned back, staring at the sparkle with wide eyes. The discoveries multiplied. With each furrow he turned, more diamonds appeared, nestled in the earth like secret treasures the world had kept for decades. The river whispered along its banks, the wind swirled gently, and the birds rose higher into the sky, as if celebrating the unveiling of the field's hidden wealth. The man who had sold it would never have imagined such a fortune lay beneath the soil he had abandoned. Word spread quietly through the village about the field's extraordinary riches. People came to look from a distance, marveling at the shimmer of diamonds caught in the sunlight, scattered across the fertile land. The new owner remained humble, tending to the field as he always had, watching the sparkle beneath his hands and smiling quietly at the wonder he had uncovered. Meanwhile, the man who had set out in search of diamonds continued his journey. He crossed forests thick with moss, rivers swollen from spring rains, valleys strewn with wildflowers, and hills that rolled endlessly into the horizon. His hope remained, quiet but unwavering, even as the realization that months had passed and diamonds were still unseen pressed gently against his heart. He pressed on, trusting that the world would reveal its secrets in time. The contrast between the two lives was stark, though neither man yet knew of it. One moved through distant lands, chasing glimmers that never appeared, guided only by hope and intuition. The other tended the field with patience, each day uncovering the hidden fortune beneath his feet, the world revealing its treasure gently, as if in reward for attention, care, and persistence. Back in the field, the diamonds seemed almost alive, catching the sunlight in ways that shifted as clouds passed overhead. Each gem reflected not just light, but the history of the land, the patience of those who had walked upon it, the quiet rhythm of wind, river, and birds. The new owner often paused, feeling the hum of the earth beneath him, realizing that what he held was more than wealth. It was a connection to the land itself, to its secrets, its life, its enduring magic. Some days he would lie beneath a tree at the field's edge, listening to the gentle murmur of the river, the rustle of the grass, the soft calls of birds as they circled above. He would watch the light shift across the diamonds in the soil, catching flashes that seemed almost like tiny stars. And in those moments, he understood that some treasures reveal themselves only when patience and care align. When the world chooses to share its secrets with the observant and the steady. Meanwhile, the man who had wandered far away faced his own challenges. Storms came suddenly, with wind whipping across exposed ridges, rain pounding the earth in torrents. He learned to navigate rivers swollen with melted snow, to find shelter in rocky clefts, to read the signs of the sky for incoming danger. Each obstacle tested his resolve, yet each also offered lessons in resilience and adaptability. The journey, he realized in quiet moments beneath star-strewn skies, was shaping him in ways he could not have foreseen. At night, he would lie beneath trees, sometimes on soft moss, sometimes on cold, rocky ground. The wind would rustle through branches above, birds would settle in their nests, and the river would sing its distant lullaby. He would close his eyes and dream of diamonds, imagining them buried beneath hills, hidden in forests, or sparkling beneath distant rivers. And yet, beneath the surface of those dreams, a subtle question stirred. Had he abandoned a treasure that was closer than he had imagined? Back at the field, the new owner discovered a pattern. The diamonds were not scattered randomly. They followed subtle alignments, as if the land itself had arranged them in quiet, deliberate order. Each day, he uncovered more. Each evening he would sit beside the river, feeling the pulse of the earth beneath him. The sunlight shifted over the field, catching gems in dazzling ways, and he felt a soft wonder settle over him. He realized that patience had been his guide, that steady attention and care had allowed him to witness the field's secret, that life itself had revealed its treasure in its own time. The birds continued their morning calls. The wind moved in gentle rhythms across the grass. The river whispered quietly. Life flowed as it always had, unnoticed by many, yet vibrant and profound for those who paid attention. The new owner moved through it all with reverence, feeling the connection between earth and sky, between the soil and the stones hidden beneath. And so, the field flourished under his care. The diamonds, once hidden, now gleamed faintly beneath each turn of soil, beneath each careful furrow. The land rewarded attention, rewarded patience, rewarded a steady heart. It seemed to hold a lesson, unspoken but palpable. Treasures sometimes wait quietly beneath what we overlook, waiting for those who move slowly enough to notice them. Meanwhile, the man who had journeyed far continued to press on, unaware of the fortune left behind. He climbed mountains blanketed in mist, waded through streams shimmering in morning light, traversed valleys where wildflowers nodded softly in the breeze. Each step was guided by hope, each night wrapped in quiet reflection,
Each morning a promise to keep moving, to keep seeking. And though he had not yet seen the diamonds, the journey itself had become a teacher. He learned to read the subtle signs in the wind, the patterns of birds, the rhythm of rivers. He learned endurance, patience, resilience, and quiet wonder. He discovered that the world spoke in whispers, that it revealed its secrets slowly, in moments of attention and care. Yet still, the ache of longing remained, a faint echo in his heart for the field he had sold, the home he had left, the life he had abandoned. Somewhere beneath the green expanse of grass, beneath the gentle hum of river and wind, a treasure awaited that he would not find until he returned. And in that moment, he understood something profound. The journey had not been wasted, nor the years spent chasing distant horizons. He had learned patience, endurance, observation, and reflection. He had learned to hear the quiet language of the world, to notice the subtle cues in wind, river, and bird. And now, returning, he understood the lesson the earth had held all along. Treasures may lie hidden beneath what we overlook, waiting for attention, care, and understanding to reveal them. The man walked slowly across the field, feeling the soil beneath his feet, brushing his hands over the grass. Each step, each breath, each gentle sound of the river and wind became a part of him, a quiet meditation. The diamonds glittered beneath the surface, but now they were not just wealth. They were a symbol of the quiet wonder he had been blind to before, the beauty of a world that moves slowly, patiently, and deliberately. The new owner approached, smiling kindly. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" he said softly. "The land has its treasures, and it reveals them to those who care to see." The man nodded, taking a deep breath. He looked out over the field, at the river winding gently, at the birds rising with the sunlight, at the diamonds hidden beneath the soil. He felt a calm understanding settle over him, a quiet peace that had been absent during his long journey. He realized that life, like the field, held treasures for those who notice, for those who move patiently, for those who listen. He sat beside the river, the wind brushing gently across his face, the grass soft beneath him, the birds calling faintly overhead. He closed his eyes and let the world wash over him, the hum of the river, the rustle of leaves, the whisper of wind. He breathed deeply, slowly, and for the first time in many years, he felt complete. Not because of wealth, not because of diamonds, but because he had returned, because he had learned, because he had seen the quiet magic of the world. And so, the field flourished, the diamonds glinting faintly beneath the soil, the river singing its constant song, the wind moving in gentle patterns, the birds circling overhead. Life continued in its quiet rhythm, a rhythm that required patience, observation, and care to understand. And the man, now sitting among the grass, felt a gentle gratitude for the journey, for the lessons, for the quiet, hidden treasures that had always been at his feet. Sometimes he whispered to the wind, softly, "Perhaps I sought far and wide, only to learn what was already here." And the wind stirred, carrying the words across the field, mingling with the river's hum and the birds' songs, blending into the eternal rhythm of life that had guided him all along. And in that quiet, gentle understanding, he drifted into rest, the soft sounds of the river, wind, and birds surrounding him, a lullaby of patience, discovery, and the treasures hidden within the ordinary, waiting to be seen. Years had passed since the man had left the village and sold his field. Seasons had cycled, rivers had swelled and ebbed, and mountains had weathered countless storms. And yet, he continued to journey, driven by hope and a quiet, stubborn longing. The diamonds he sought remained elusive, hidden somewhere far beyond the hills, beyond the forests, beyond the rivers that sang their constant song. He crossed plains that stretched endlessly beneath soft skies, forests where sunlight dappled the ground in gentle patterns, and hills where the wind moved like a soft brush across the earth. Birds guided him at times, their voices drifting clearly in the crisp morning air. Streams and rivers whispered to him as he followed their curves, offering subtle clues, or at least the comforting sound of movement in a world that could sometimes feel unmoving. The journey had shaped him. His hands, once soft from working the field, were now calloused from climbing, from clearing paths, from carrying what little he could hold. His eyes had learned to read the light, to notice the glint of water, the shimmer of stone, the flight of birds. His mind had learned patience, endurance, and reflection, shaped by the quiet and subtle lessons of the world around him. But beneath all of this, there remained a soft ache, a whisper of doubt that had never fully faded. Perhaps, he thought, the diamonds had been closer than he imagined. Perhaps the field he sold, the home he left behind, had held the treasure all along. He had never truly considered it. His imagination carried always to distant horizons. Now, years later, that thought lingered softly, persistent like a shadow at the edge of light. And so, he began the journey back. Each step carried memory as well as hope. He remembered the field he had walked through so many mornings ago, the wind brushing the grass, the river singing quietly beside it, the birds rising with the sun. He remembered the feeling of the soil beneath his feet, the quiet magic that had existed there without his notice. The closer he came to the village, the more the world felt familiar. The hills rolled as they had in his memory, the river curved in its old, gentle way, and the birds called softly from the trees at the field's edge. A quiet anticipation built in his chest. He could not yet see the diamonds, could not yet know the fortune that lay beneath the soil. All he knew was the ache of memory and the soft pull of curiosity. As he approached the field, the first rays of morning light spilled across the green expanse. The wind moved through the grass in gentle waves, carrying the faint hum of the river and the soft rustle of birds overhead. The field seemed ordinary at first, alive but serene, untouched in its quiet perfection. Yet something about it felt different, as if the land itself had shifted while he was away, as if it were waiting for him to return. The new owner worked there now, tending the field with careful hands, planting and harvesting, observing each subtle shift in light and soil. Diamonds glimmered faintly beneath the surface, hidden treasures that had revealed themselves gradually, over time, through attention, patience, and care. Each day, the new owner uncovered more, small flashes of brilliance that caught the sunlight and seemed to reflect the quiet rhythm of life itself. The man paused at the edge of the field. He breathed slowly, letting the wind brush across his face, letting the sunlight warm his shoulders. He could hear the soft murmur of the river, the birds singing faintly, the whisper of the grass under the wind's gentle touch. And then he saw it, the first hint of sparkle as light struck the soil in a way he had never noticed before. His heart sank softly, like a leaf falling into a quiet stream. Diamonds, countless diamonds, lay beneath the field he had abandoned, glinting subtly in the sunlight. He knelt, brushing the soil gently with his hands, and for a long moment he did not move, did not speak. The realization washed over him gently, quietly, like the river flowing beside him. The treasure he had sought for years, the fortune he had dreamed of, had been under his feet all along. He stood slowly, the wind stirring the grass around him. The birds rose above the trees, calling softly in patterns he had once followed so far from home. He listened to the river's gentle hum and felt a deep connection to the land he had left behind, a connection he had never truly recognized when he had walked it each morning in his old life.